Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a highly acclaimed filmmaker from Lithuania, whose latest film, entitled The Jump, chronicles one of the Cold War's most complex and suspenseful episodes. On November 23rd, 1970, a Lithuanian seaman by the name of Simas Kudirka jumped from a Soviet fishing vessel that was anchored just off the coast of Martha's Vineyard onto the U.S. Coast Guard ship Vigilant, desperately seeking political asylum. The U.S. Coast Guard, however, returned him to the Soviets, who convicted him of treason and sentenced him to 10 years in a concentration camp. This incident, commonly referred to as the U.S. Coast Guard's Day of Shame, is widely considered to be one of the biggest political blunders of the Cold War. And it set off a series of protests throughout the United States and marked the beginning of a long political battle to save Mr. Kudirka and bring him and his family to America, which finally happened in 1974. The film is now available on Amazon, Apple TV, and a number of other streaming platforms. Our guest, appearing from Lithuania, is renowned documentary filmmaker Giedrė Žickytė, whose films including Baras, How We Played the Revolution, Master and Tatiana, and I'm Not From Here, have won 14 film festival awards. Giedre, welcome to our show, and thank you so much for being here.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here and speak with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you. Giedre, your film tells such a compelling and fascinating story, and I've noticed that many of your films deal with the subject of freedom. You were born in the Soviet Union. You were 10 years old when Lithuania became an independent country. Is that why the subject of freedom resonates with you so much?
Yes, of course. And actually, only now when I look back at my filmography, I discover that this theme of freedom is repeating, is recurring. And I just think maybe, yes, I was because a child of so-called perestroika. Perestroika was a movement when Soviet Union, that happened before Soviet Union fall apart. And I really remember this time so vividly. I was 8-9 years old when Lithuania became independent. And actually it was the first country from the Soviet Union who declared its independence. And I never forget this feeling. And especially this transfer moment when we were breaking from the totalitarian system now to the free system, it was so special and so specific that if you would appear in 90s, in 89, 88 in Lithuania, you would feel that you are not on Earth. You would feel that you are somewhere else, like in some wonderland, because all people were so united. You could see, it was no matter what is your age, no matter what is your religion, everybody, even what is your nationality, even local Russians were supporting the idea of our independence. And this feeling of unity and this feeling of love that was in the streets, in the meetings, in the songs. Our movement was so much connected with songs. And can you just imagine that it was like rock music, religion, our folk song, everything on one stage. But it looked for us very normal. And I felt that maybe life is like that. And I was like a kid. And this feeling of freedom, this sweet word called freedom, remained in my mind forever. And maybe that's why I'm so much interested in the fates, in the fortunes of people who lived before we became independent. And I was, maybe during my films, I'm just trying to understand what is to live if you cannot choose yourself, if you cannot decide on your own, if the government decides for you, if the system decides for you, and especially if it's a Soviet system.
How did you first learn about Simas Kudirka and his story?
It was when I was in the United States with my previous film. I had a screening in LA, and I met a Lithuanian producer, Marius Vilunas, who works in Los Angeles. And he just asked me, have I ever heard about a man who jumped from the ship to ship during the Cold War? And I don't know, he just told me this event of jump, of this action of the jump. And somehow I couldn't forget that story. And slowly I started trying to get to collect more information. And the more research I did, the more it looked for me like an unbelievable and fascinating story. That is like like a box of surprises that you open one box, you find another surprise, you find again, and you find another surprise. So I think I spent maybe 2 years of collecting materials, and then I got the phone of Simas, and one day in July I knocked at his door, and that's how we started making this movie.
When you were filming The Jump, you were so fortunate that Mr. Kudirka was still alive in his 90s and able to participate in the movie. He even came to America for the filming. What were your impressions of him, Giedre?
In the very beginning, when I knocked at his door and he opened it for me, of course, neither me, neither him, we didn't know what the movie is going to be. I had to meet him at first. And if I would tell him, Kudirka, let's go to America, let's go to the same ship where everything happened, I think he maybe would just close the door and it would be over. And even me, I didn't even imagine that it's possible that this ship Vigilant, Coast Guard ship, is still existing. In documentaries, it always takes a time. So first we needed to meet. First we needed to know each other and to find the way. And me, by knowing the character, I had to find a way how to tell his story. And then I saw, because the story was so fascinating, but it happened in the past. And it's not a fiction film, it's a documentary. We need to feel it, we need to show it's a movie. So I was thinking how to tell this incredible story today from a documentary point of view.
Well, somehow you were able to convince the US Coast Guard to allow you to film on the actual ship that Mr. Kudirka jumped onto back in 1970, the Vigilant. How did you manage to do that?
I don't know. We just requested, and we were waiting very long. I think it took 1.5 years to get permission and finally to get on the ship. Maybe many bureaucratic procedures, and of course, I am not an American citizen, and our film crew are not American citizen. The ship was in Florida. The filming department was in LA, and Coast Guard is in Boston, and it belongs to State Department. It is in Washington. So of course, it was a huge procedure. But this is what I also learned about America while I was making this film. Things can be very complicated, many documentation, many rules. But once you are there, you will receive a full support. So this is actually what happened for us, for our film crew. I thought I will never get on the ship because it was so many like rule after rule, document after document. But finally, when we were on the deck, I'm so surprised of the support that we got from the Coast Guard, from the captain, from all the crew. It looked that everybody on the ship was just for us. We really made it that the ship was for 2 days just for us, just for our movie. And I'm very thankful for this.
Well, I have to tell you, the scenes that you filmed on The Vigilant were, in my opinion, the most emotional scenes in the movie. Now, I'm sure that as a director, you had a plan for how you wanted the filming to go on the ship, but it all seemed so spontaneous and realistic. What was your strategy for those scenes that you filmed on the ship?
First of all, of course, I had a plan what we need. We even had a script which we had to give for the Coast Guard to secure the permission to shoot on the film. But as usually happens with a documentary filmmaking, you need to have a plan, but you also need to be very intuitive and open for reality, for what life will give for you. Getting there with Simas, with our main character, Simas Kudirka, on the same ship, where 50 years ago he experienced such a huge tragedy of his life. It was really a very emotional event for him. And since the character is very, very honest and very, very artistic, I had the intuition that it will not be a fake. Because on the one hand, you can think
okay, it's a constructive situation. The film director brings somebody after so many years and asked whatever to reenact. It really could look unethical or fake or something untrue. But once Simas, in the beginning, of course, when we came here, Simas was very emotional, but the more we shot and when we were approaching the night scene, when he was beaten by Soviets and being caught, when the Soviets were catching him around all the ship, the emotions in him bursted so naturally, and it looks like that night just came back. And I just realized now my duty is not to disturb, not to interrupt. Just let him be as he is and let the camera follow him, because the reality was the best director and the truth, what Simas felt, was the best script. And I can tell that he was so emotional. Of course, it was longer that you can see on the film. But everybody, all our crew, and also part of the Coast Guard team that were like upstairs observing that situation, everybody was even not breathing. So emotional it was.
Do you think that going back to that ship was therapeutic for Mr. Kudirka?
Yeah, I really think that it was not, that he was reliving his story. Yeah, and it was a therapy for him.
Now, there's so many aspects of the story that are just astonishing. For example, at the time that the Coast Guard returned Mr. Kudirka to the Soviets, they justified it by saying that Mr. Kudirka could not receive asylum because he jumped onto the American boat instead of into the ocean. They said that if he had jumped into the water, they absolutely would have rescued him and kept him. That's just so outrageous and bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And there were many other things like these so-called bureaucratic bungles that when you follow the incident that actually lasted 8 hours, this incident was more than 8 hours, and there is like a whole record, the Congress record of the whole incident. Really, at the same time, it's so universal, and you have to understand that this is how bureaucracy sometimes works. I know that after this incident, the American government made a new laws how to deal with the defectors and how to handle.
Now, I should mention that after an investigation by the Coast Guard, disciplinary action was taken against a number of Coast Guard personnel, including the commander of the 1st Coast Guard District and his chief of staff, for assuming authority beyond their competence in deciding that Mr. Kudirka should be sent back to Soviet custody against his wishes. Also, the skipper of the Coast Guard ship was reprimanded for not stopping the Soviets from viciously and savagely beating Mr. Kudirka when they came aboard the American ship to drag him back into their custody. Giedre, you interviewed some of the Coast Guard people, and the impression I got is that they deeply regretted sending Mr. Kudirka back to the Soviets, even though they were acting on direct orders from their superiors. What was your impression of the Coast Guard staff that you interviewed?
You are totally right. We really regretted it. And I felt that story, even though it happened 50 years ago, for them, this story stayed all life, like with them. And when we contacted, it was Commander Justis, captain of the Vigilant, and Commander Lieutenant Mr. Paul Pecos, the second commander. So mainly it was like the captain of the ship and the second person on the ship, and they were direct witness of the incident. And before I contacted captain, I heard that he never gave an interview. He never wanted to talk about that. So I was not sure whether he will or not. To my surprise, he agreed. He agreed very easily, and I felt a deep respect for both of them and the way how they accepted all the situation. And it was also a big drama for Captain Justis, because he was a young captain at the time. He decided to follow the orders, and this is, an eternal question, what the officer should do, follow the order or act according his heart. And after that incident, he never went to the sea. And the story of Kudirka was always in his heart and in his mind. But the way how he accepted that situation, I can call, he accepted it in a uniform, if you understand what I mean. He's an officer and he wears a uniform. So he accepts like that, like with a, and I was very thankful for them. But here I should tell a very important thing. We also met with Simas. These meetings were just amazing because Simas started apologizing them and that he ruined their careers. And they started apologizing Simas that because of their decision, he had to experience such a tragedy and was sent to the prison. The scenes were filmed, but they are not in the movie, even though they were very great. But it usually happens that during the editing, you should, we have this expression, kill your darlings. So sometimes you need to take out the best scenes for the sake of the film. Otherwise, that would be a film about forgiveness because we were so strong. So sometimes you need to choose what is your film about. But for me, the most important that we met each other. And this meeting for all sides was very, very important. And just see that nobody carries here any angriness or any other hate inside their heart.
Well, if you put the movie out on a DVD, do you think you could include those scenes as a special feature? Because I think a lot of people would like to see that interaction between Simas and the officers.
Yeah, we should think something about this because we're very unique.
You just said something very important. Your film raises the interesting question of whether there is ever a moral justification to not follow an order given by a superior. As you know, there have been many times when soldiers have done terrible things and then they claim that they were just following orders. Given what happened to Mr. Kudirka, do you think there are times when it is necessary to disobey an order?
It's only my personal opinion, but of course, I would always follow, the justice and my heart and what is important for human being, not for the orders. And you are right. I think, yes, this is a very complex, complicated, and eternal question. I remember when Simas came back to the Vigilant ship when we were shooting, he had conversation with the crew. And even though they were of course, we knew all Simas Kudirka story because this story is in the Coast Guard school. I mean, it's like part of the program in this Coast Guard Academy. And when he was talking with them, they told that in captain situation, some of them told, even knowing that it was wrong, they would do the same because they are officers. And I remember that Simas came back from the shooting and he couldn't forget it. He was very lost after that when he heard that.
Now, one of the most fascinating parts of the film is that you were able to interview Henry Kissinger, who played a very important role in getting President Gerald Ford to pressure the Soviets to release Mr. Kudirka. Tell us about your impressions of Mr. Kissinger.
So first of all, when I got the idea to have Kissinger in the film, I was already editing the film. And then I thought, okay, I need Kissinger. But everybody was telling, forget it, it's impossible. Okay, let's try. So I tried and we got him. And I think he agreed because he felt that the story was important and he remembered it. Because as his office told me, he gets 500 requests every day to do something, like to comment on something or to give interview. So I really appreciate that he agreed for that. We came to his office and we had a specific place where we needed to do that interview. And that was just a cabinet. It was so boring, like a very dull office, not cinematic at all. And then suddenly we had 5 minutes to find solutions. So that's why we suddenly, okay, let's switch off the light and let's just open window to have a perspective. And at least that we had some cinematic small moments in the film. So this for me was the first experience that when you're interviewing such people from that kind of status, you need still to be very imaginative and to find solution. And of course, secondly, he is very, very charismatic person, and that you really can feel it. I mean, the moment he entered in the room, you just feel like this strong energy coming from him, and you understand why. Okay, he's a world-known celebrity. So usually these people have very strong energy and charisma around them, no matter their age.
Now, the film makes it very clear that the American Lithuanian community was extremely persistent in mobilizing a widespread protest in support of Mr. Kudirka. The Lithuanian activists in America were instrumental in getting Mr. Kudirka to the United States. You must be so proud of those men and women from your country, but living in America, who worked so hard to support one of their countrymen.
Yes, and this is for me the most beautiful part of that story. It is what the society, what other people, what Lithuanian Americans, and that were joined later by other immigrants, by all these immigrant communities, what we did in order to save one man from the prison. A man we didn't know anything about, just his single photo that he left on the ship when he jumped from his ID document. And that was for me something so fascinating that when I was looking at the archives of these endless crowds that gathered to support Simas, it was very touching and sad at the same time. Sad because I realized that Simas' story was a miracle. A miracle because there are so many sufferings, political prisoners, injustice in the world. And it is so rare that people so much unite and are indifferent, that we cared for him, this is just, if it would not be a documentary film, if it would be a fiction film, you would think, oh, we made up a story. That could not happen like that.
Do you think that for the Lithuanian American community, Mr. Kudirka became a symbol for them of the oppression behind the Iron Curtain?
Absolutely. And not only for them. So that's why they were joined by other communities from the oppressed countries. So they were not only like Estonians, Latvians, Czechs, Polish, Ukrainians, and also Americans. Because, Sima's story found he touched millions of hearts because of many. So, of course, for Lithuanians, for the people, for other nations from the oppressed countries, it was very clear why the story so important for them. But at the same time, for Americans, because how could American government act this way, that we are declaring that as we see in the film, like Nixon says, that we are open for refugees, that, this is like, our Statue of Liberty is like inviting, come here, all the poor, we will. And suddenly they act in such an inhuman way. They just throw the man who just asks for freedom. So, the American society was also shocked because it destroyed all their principles.
Well, speaking of Lithuanian Americans, I want to take a moment and thank my very dear friend, Ruta Lee, who is, of course, a very popular Hollywood star. She's also a very proud Lithuanian and Canadian, I might add. Ruta contacted me after seeing your film, and she put me in touch with Daiva Navaret, the honorary consul of the Republic of Lithuania, who then very kindly put me in touch with you. So you can see, Giedre, that the Lithuanian community here in America is still very much supporting Mr. Kudirka and very much supporting you and your wonderful movie.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you for your comment. It's very nice.
Now, Mr. Kudirka was ultimately allowed to move to the United States because his mother was born in America. Do you think he would have been allowed to come to America if his mother was not American?
I don't know, but it was like this miracle, the thing that we discovered by the document. It was a complete miracle and a coincidence and like a fate that you could not. But this miracle and this coincidence of fate would not happen if not people who worked for his release. Yes, this document helped him to make this process legally. But if not the pressure, if not the work, the hard work of the community, of the society, that would meant nothing.
Now, as you know, in 1978, there was a TV movie about this incident called The Defection of Simas Kudirka, starring Arkin, which won 2 Emmy Awards, and it plays a part in your film as well. What did you think of that movie?
I don't know, it's very American. Of course, I was looking this film from my own perspective. At the same time, I understand the importance of that film that when he appeared in 1978.
Well, is it fair to say that Mr. Kudirka himself was very touched by the movie?
Yes, of course he was touched. But it was a mixed feelings of many things, of reality and fiction, of being him as a human being and being represented as a symbol. So it's a lot of contradictions and mixed feelings in between. But this is what life is. So that's why it's so complex. That's why I left this scene in the film, because it was very important for me. Because this film really represents that Kudirka was made as a symbol. But nobody was interested in him as a human being. And this was also Simas' drama.
Now, Giedre, I must tell you that I was really surprised to learn that after everything Mr. Kudirka went through to come to America and all the work that was done to bring him here, he ended up being disillusioned with his life in New York and moved back to Lithuania. What did you think of that decision?
I am not surprised at all. I think that's such a universal and eternal thing that a man wants to come back home. So Simas just simply came back home.
Well, your film has something important to say about the American dream and the American lifestyle. At one point in the movie, Mr. Kudirka says that Americans are rich and lucky, but they don't really appreciate what they have. And they waste too much by throwing away things that still work. In fact, he tells us that he got his TV from somebody's garbage. But you know that America is a country of extremes. There are very rich people and also very poor people. Do you think that Simas understood that?
Yes, of course. That moment in the film, in Simas' story, I find reflection of myself in 2 ways. From one way, of course, this is like this serious part, this dramatic part, our history, exile, occupation, suppression. Almost every family in Lithuania were affected by the Soviet occupation. My grandparents were deported to Siberia. In our family, we have partisans. Everybody, one way and another in Lithuania, were affected by this brutal and long Soviet occupation. And that's why we were so incredibly now happy that we can now live freely. And that's why we maybe understand, we have more empathy for the nations who are seeking for their freedoms. On the other hand, since I still was a kid when we became independent, I find my reflection in Simas as a kid. And here we come to America dream. About Simas' dream, about seeing palms or buying a Grundig or getting that to television from the garbage. And for foreigners, I understand that's just more an anecdote or funny thing. But for us, Soviet people, that was a real reality. And I really understand him. We were dreaming. For us, like America was a paradise that we could never reach. And every single thing from America was like a wow, in a gray Soviet reality, because we were no jeans. If you could get jeans from America, oh my God, the jeans costed like 3 salaries of ordinary Soviet citizen, and you could not buy them. For example, the cans of this Coke, Sprite, Fanta, these shiny cans. In 90s, because we didn't have that cans, that all things in the Soviet Union. In 90, with perestroika, we started getting little bit, if somebody traveled, could bring. So people were keeping these cans in their cupboards as a decoration, as a trophy. the bubble gum from America, when the first Lithuanian Americans get permission a little bit to visit Lithuania, and they were bringing a bubble gum from America, you were chewing this gum, and then you give to your friend. When he chews this gum, and then he gives to his friend. From lips to lips to lips to lips. And of course, now when I tell to my son this kind of stories, for him, this is because for him, what is bubble gum? It's nothing. It's like I can buy it in every kiosk and it's not a problem. For us, it was a sign of freedom. Like bananas, the same. We never got bananas normally in Soviet Union. Twice per year, there is a huge queue where you can buy green bananas. I remember, if just to remember my childhood, every day I was standing in some queue. I go with a shop and my mom tells, you stand this queue, I stand this queue. And I'm standing because it means that we brought either green peas, either bananas, either mayonnaise. It was a deficit in the Soviet times. So I'm telling you just the stories, just to understand how, besides this political thing, besides this not being able to express your views, being governed by Moscow, being by all the stupid ideology, there was also and their simple life that was also very crazy. That's why I have these moments in the film, because I really identify with Simas that much. And for me, that tells so much about freedom, because now I can get bananas every day in the market. We buy bananas. Sometimes you don't eat them at once, and they got bad, and you throw away, and you like. And when I ask myself, is it the same that we do with our freedom, that we don't appreciate anymore? We just take it as a granted, like with bananas. They don't have that sweet taste as it had during the Soviet time. It's just an everyday taste. And I think, yeah, it's normal, it's bananas. So I think usually people also, oh, it's normal, we are free, we can speak whatever we want, I can make film whatever I want, I can have interview with you now, and no censorship is listening to me. I can speak openly, and I'm not afraid that I will be punished for my words. And it was not like that in the Soviet time. If I would be a filmmaker during the Soviet time, I will have a huge commission watching my film before I will release. And I will be asked, you need to cut out that, or that. That's the essence of that thing. And that's why the scenes of Simas, just simply enjoying that recorder, which he just found in the garbage, enjoying as a kid. I hope that these scenes will make us a little bit to appreciate how Simas says, the freedoms that we have. And as we see now under the current events in the Ukraine, that freedom is so fragile, is so fragile. And we should do everything to protect it. And that's why maybe we here in Lithuania so much also support Ukraine, like all the world. And because we understand that we are fighting not for only their freedom, but for the freedom of all of us.
It's really very timely that your movie should come out now while we are in the midst of a horrible invasion and inhumanity and cruelty in the Ukraine.
I mean, it's obvious, this is very horrible.
Giedre, tell us about the reactions you've received about the movie. All of the reviews have been extremely positive. People are saying that this movie is the best documentary you've ever made. Do you agree?
I think it's dangerous for the filmmaker, for the artist, just to think about his work in a category. Oh, maybe this is the best what I made. I don't know. I just did my work. I'm working now on my new film. And I mean, with every new film, you are the same, like a beginner, a fragile, you don't know where it will take. And it's a journey. So actually, I'm not thinking about this, like best or not best.
You've made 5 documentaries so far. You've won so many awards for your work. You're working on a new film now. I heard a rumor that the new film is about a woman. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about the new film?
I started following Professor Giedre Zickyte. She's a Holocaust survivor, and a wonderful, wonderful person who was my friend. I was inspired by her as a personality and the way how she dealt with the Holocaust trauma, that she turned it into the love and into the connecting different cultures and inviting into the dialogue and always talking that do not revenge. So that was for me very unique and specific. I started shooting her, observing her life. Sadly, the pandemic started and we lost Irena. She was 92 years old. So I hadn't filmed everything, what I wanted, but it's so interesting. This film becomes now like my inner journey. And now, especially when all these things started in Ukraine, I'm now editing this film. It becomes so relevant. Irena was always telling to me that she was feeling that the mood of society her reminds 1939 because she witnesses that. So it means like she saw that it will be with the world as it is now. And we also have found a very, very unique archive. And from Kaunas ghetto, where she was and where she escaped Kaunas ghetto by miracle. Her family was killed there. Her mother, before dying, told to her, "Do not revenge," and it became motto of Irena's life. And then she was saved by a Lithuanian woman, mother of 6 children. And then the Soviets came to Lithuania, and her second mother was deported to Siberia. So through the fate of Irena, we can see this 20th century and these two terrible regimes, totalitarian regimes. But when I was making this film, I was thinking, it's not with the archives, I'm making film about present. I was shooting Irena in the present time. The book of her life is released. You also can find it. It's also translated into English language. It's available online to buy it. It's a conversations with her about her life. And since she passed away and all the events also started in Ukraine, I realized, no, it's also, I need to go back to the past. And this time in this film, I am exploring the Holocaust part of Lithuania, the Holocaust site. So it will be like a trilogy, because with the Simas story, we go into the Soviet occupation. And through Irena, I will see another part of our country's history that was hidden for so many years. It's important because when the Second World War ended, for many countries, it was like a liberation from Nazi. For our countries, for Eastern European countries, it was the change of oppressor. The Soviets came. And still during the Soviet time, nobody was talking about Holocaust. The narrative was, what I remember from my childhood, that the bad Germans were killing good Soviet citizens. And still, and my character during the Soviet time was still not able to share her stories. And when we became independent, now I'm talking from Lithuanian points of view, our narrative started also very important, that our deportations, our sufferings, and again, Holocaust, it was already like the Jewish tragedy. It
was suppressed.
No. We started to talk about Jewish tragedy, but not that. I mean, because so many things started to being carried outside, but we have to be silent during all the Soviet era. And suddenly, when we became independent, it was about that we were deported to Siberia. And then Holocaust, again, it was not that much conversations about it.
It was suppressed.
In a way, now it's talking more and more. And here becomes very, very important thing because of this. In Lithuania, there were so many Jewish killed because Vilnius, Lithuania, Vilnius is capital of Lithuania, was even called Northern Jerusalem because it was such a big Jewish population. And 98% of them were killed. So when I discovered these numbers, I was so shocked. I couldn't understand that, because when I was thinking about Holocaust, for me it was not so close. It was somewhere connected more with Germany, Polish. And then I realized that in my country it was 98%. So I thought, oh my God, so if I would be Jewish, I would get more chances to survive in Auschwitz than in Vilnius by percentage. And Irena is a miracle. She's one of those few who stay alive and who never left that country where her family was. And she considered herself Lithuanian, and she loved Lithuania very much. And even more, she started studying German literature because she fell and became a professor of German language because she became in love. She really liked the poetry of Schiller in secret ghetto school.
This is just amazing. I'm asking you to promise me that when your new movie comes out, you will come back on our show and help promote it. I would love to see it, and I would love to have you back.
Yes, I promise you. I am and thank you very much that you invited me here and that you are also interested in the new movie which is coming out. I am from Lithuania, from a very small country, which population is 3 million people, like your audience of your show. And sometimes people don't know much about our country and its history.
Well, I want to say to our viewers that I hope you'll take the time to watch The Jump, which is not only one of the best documentaries about a fascinating time in history, but given what's currently going on in the Ukraine, the message of this movie should resonate with all of us very deeply. Giedre, I want to congratulate you on making such an excellent film, and I thank you so much for taking the time to appear on our show.
Thank you so much for inviting. I greatly appreciate it. And I really hope that the audience will enjoy the film.
Our guest has been highly acclaimed filmmaker Giedre Zickytė, whose film The Jump is now available for viewing on Amazon, Apple TV, Topic, and many other streaming platforms. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.